It started on a Tuesday morning, just like any other. I walked out with my coffee, ready to grab the mail, and saw something I didn't expect. My mailbox, bent sideways, the door hanging open like it had been hit by a truck. At first, I thought it was a random accident. Maybe the landscaping crew had backed into it. Maybe some kid took a bat to it on a dare. But I looked around, no tire tracks, no kids, no witnesses. Just my poor mailbox, leaning like it had been in a fight and lost. I straightened it up as best I could, chalked it up to bad luck, and moved on. But then it happened again. 3 days later, same thing. Only this time, the whole post was cracked at the base. Clean break. Someone had done it on purpose. Now I was suspicious. I checked my doorbell cam footage, but the mailbox was just out of frame. Typical. I didn't have any proof. Just a growing gut feeling. And when you live in a neighborhood like mine, an HOA community with strict rules, manicured lawns, and nosy board members, you start connecting dots quickly. Especially when one of those board members has a reputation. Karen. Her name's not really Karen, but you know the type. She walks around like she owns the place. Carries a clipboard. Wears that fake smile. She once gave me a written warning for having a garden hose uncoiled on my front lawn for more than 2 hours. 2 hours. Who times that? Anyway, I didn't want to jump to conclusions. So I replaced the mailbox with a new one. A simple one. Same style. Nothing flashy. Just wanted it to be left alone. It lasted 5 days. This time, it was smashed completely flat. Bent metal, shattered wood. Whoever did it didn't just hit it, they destroyed it. It was personal now. Still, I had no footage. No witness. And no one in the neighborhood saw a thing. That's the funny thing about these HOA communities. Everyone smiles at you in the daylight, then shuts their blinds when things get weird. I went to the HOA board, brought photos, and asked for help. They said they'd look into it. Which is HOA code for, we don't care unless it's about paint colors. I left the meeting more frustrated than when I walked in. And Karen? She sat across the room smirking the whole time. She didn't say a word, but I could see it in her face. That smug, satisfied look. Now I was angry. This wasn't just a prank or a one-time thing. Someone was deliberately trying to get under my skin. And I had a strong feeling I knew who. But I couldn't accuse her outright. Not yet. So I decided to play it smart. I installed a new mailbox again, but this time I made a few upgrades. I used reinforced steel for the post, filled it with concrete, and sunk it deeper into the ground. From the outside it looked normal. A bit sturdier maybe, but nothing crazy. But under the surface? It was built like a tank. And just to be sure, I moved a small outdoor camera and angled it right at the spot. This time, if anything happened, I'd know exactly who did it. I didn't have to wait long. 3 nights later, around 11:45 p.m., I heard a thud outside. A solid, heavy hit, followed by a second one. I rushed to the window and caught a quick blur of someone walking off fast. Too fast to be casual. Too fast to be innocent. I didn't sleep much that night. First thing in the morning, I ran out and checked. The mailbox was still standing. Not a dent. Not a scratch. Just a few scuff marks on the base. Like something, or someone, had hit it hard and bounced off. I checked the footage. And that's when everything started falling into place. I hit play on the footage, leaning in close. The infrared night vision wasn't perfect, but it was enough. A shadow moved across the frame, fast and low. Then there it was. A figure, right at the edge of my driveway. Hoodie on, gloves. They crept up to the mailbox like they'd done it 100 times before. No hesitation. They raised something, looked like a steel rod or maybe a tire iron, and swung it down hard. The mailbox didn't budge. The attacker flinched. They tried again. Wham, nothing. My mailbox stood there like a stone pillar. And then, this part made me laugh, they started shaking their hand like it hurt. I swear, even in black and white, I could see the frustration in their body language. They looked around nervously, then gave it one last angry kick before limping off into the night. I backed up the footage and watched it again. Frame by frame. That limp. That build. That walk. I had a hunch, but I needed a better angle. So I rewired my other cam and added a second one across the yard. This time with a wider view. I wasn't just trying to catch damage anymore. I wanted a face. Because here's the thing. I wasn't just doing this for me anymore. This whole situation had turned into something bigger. If someone in this community thought it was okay to destroy property out of spite and get away with it, I had to put a stop to it. And if it really was who I thought it was, this could get interesting fast. I didn't tell anyone about the new setup. I kept quiet. Repainted the mailbox to make it look fresh again, like I just put another one up. Even left a small dent on the side to make it look weak. It was bait. And it worked faster than I expected. 2 nights later, movement triggered the new camera. I watched from my phone as the same figure returned. This time they moved slower. More cautious. They approached the mailbox, stared at it, then pulled something from their jacket. It looked like a small hammer. They tried again. But no luck. The figure looked around, clearly confused. They circled the mailbox like it had betrayed them. Then they did something bold. They took off the hoodie. And there she was. Even with grainy footage, I recognized her face. Karen. Caught in 4K? Well, close enough. I paused the clip and just stared. She had that same smug look she always wore at board meetings. Only this time, she was standing on my lawn, caught red-handed in the middle of the night, vandalizing my property. I didn't know whether to laugh or get angry. I saved the footage in 3 different places. I backed it up to a flash drive. Emailed it to myself. Uploaded it to the cloud. I wasn't taking chances. But the next morning, I didn't report it, not yet. I had another idea. I printed a still frame from the video, just one where she was holding the hammer, mid-swing, face clear as day. I slid it into a plain envelope and dropped it off at the HOA Dropbox. No note. No explanation. Just the photo. Then I waited. The next board meeting was in 3 days. When I showed up, it was the quietest one I'd ever been to. Karen didn't look at me. In fact, she didn't say a word the entire meeting. No clipboards. No eye rolls. Just silence. I didn't say anything either. Not yet. I wanted to see how far she'd take it. But later that week, I noticed something strange. My mailbox hadn't just survived. Now it was getting compliments. Neighbors I barely knew started stopping by. Hey, love what you did with that thing. Super solid. Looks indestructible. Where'd you get it? I've been having issues too. Maybe I should build one like yours. I just smiled. Because now, this wasn't just about a mailbox. It was becoming something else entirely. It was wild how quickly everything shifted. One week, I was dealing with a busted mailbox every few days. The next, people were stopping by like I was some kind of neighborhood hero. Word had gotten around fast. I didn't tell anyone about the camera or the photo I left in the HOA box, but it didn't matter. Something had definitely rattled Karen, and the energy in the community had changed. I noticed she stopped doing her usual patrols. No more early morning walks with her clipboard. No more slow drives around the block in her golf cart, checking for garbage bins left out too long. It was like she'd gone invisible, which, for Karen, was very out of character. But I didn't trust it. People like her don't just disappear. They retreat, regroup, and come back stronger, or sneakier. And sure enough, it didn't take long for her next move. It was a Saturday afternoon. I was out in the yard planting some new shrubs when a white envelope showed up taped to my front door. No stamp, no name, just typed text in all caps. Mailbox violates HOA structural aesthetics policy, immediate removal required. I actually laughed when I read it. Not only had I followed every single mailbox regulation the HOA had listed on their little website, but I'd even painted it in the same neutral color as before. Nothing about it broke the rules, except maybe the fact that it didn't break when she hit it. But still, I took the letter seriously. I knew better than to ignore anything with the HOA logo on it. That's how they get you. Silent fines, late penalties, and before you know it, they've got a lien on your property over a mailbox dispute. So, I gathered up every document I could. Screenshots of the HOA mailbox guidelines, photos of my original box, receipts for the new build, even a short video showing the installation step by step. I put everything in a folder and marched it right to the next HOA board meeting. The room was tense the moment I walked in. Karen was back, clipboard in hand, same tight smile. But she didn't say a word when I sat down. When it was my turn to speak, I kept it simple. I laid out my evidence. I stated clearly that the mailbox followed every guideline, that it was secure, structurally sound, painted the required color, and placed exactly where the previous one had been. I didn't accuse her of anything. I didn't mention the photo. But I did look right at her when I said, "And I've installed cameras to ensure the property stays that way." Something about that sentence hit different. I saw it in her eyes. For the first time, she looked uncomfortable. She flipped through her papers, scribbled something down, and avoided eye contact for the rest of the meeting. The rest of the board? They nodded. They didn't ask many questions. One of the newer members even said, "If anything, it's probably the strongest mailbox in the neighborhood." I left that meeting feeling like maybe, just maybe, things were turning. But it didn't stop there. The next morning, a neighbor from across the street, James, I think his name is, came over. He said, "Hey, I don't want to stir the pot, but Karen's been talking about you, saying your mailbox is a safety risk to kids on bikes." I raised an eyebrow. Kids on bikes? It's a mailbox, not a tank. He chuckled. "I know. Just thought you should hear it from someone else." So she was still at it, still trying to find a way to twist the narrative. But now I had something I didn't have before: proof, support, and a lot less fear. And oddly enough, I started noticing something new. More neighbors walking by, nodding, smiling. A few even asking for advice on dealing with their own weird HOA issues. Like I'd become some unofficial resistance leader. It wasn't what I expected. All I wanted was to protect my mailbox. But now it felt like I was part of something bigger. Like every hit Karen took at me had actually pushed the neighborhood to open its eyes. And whether she liked it or not, things weren't going back to the way they were. A week later, a flyer showed up in everyone's mailbox. An actual printed flyer, folded, and sealed with a cheap little HOA sticker. Bold letters at the top read, "Emergency Community Safety Review, Mandatory Attendance." Date, time, location, all set for that Friday night at the clubhouse. No real explanation, just vague talk about property hazards and compliance enforcement. I knew what this was. Karen's next attempt to come after me. Only now she was doing it with an audience. Friday night rolled around, and the room was packed. Way more people than usual. Normally, these meetings had maybe 10 people. That night, at least 40 chairs were filled. People standing along the walls. I recognized a lot of faces, neighbors who had kept their heads down until now. Some of them had probably seen what Karen had been doing. Maybe even had their own stories. Karen sat at the front of the room, shuffling papers, acting official. She cleared her throat and started talking like she was reading off a script. "Good evening, everyone. We're here to discuss a growing concern in our neighborhood. Specifically, a mailbox that may pose a safety hazard due to its non-standard construction." That was my cue. I stood up slowly. Didn't say a word. Just walked to the front, carrying the same folder I'd brought to the last meeting. Except this time, I had one more thing inside. A second printed photo. The same still shot of Karen mid-swing, hammer in hand, from the camera footage. I set it down on the table in front of the board. Calmly, quietly. The room went completely still. Karen froze. She didn't reach for the photo. She didn't speak. The board members leaned in, squinting, whispering to each other. I didn't have to say a word. The image said enough. Her face, clear as day. The tool in her hand. The mailbox behind her. I looked out at the crowd and finally broke the silence. "I've received 3 violation notices from this board in the last month," I said, keeping my voice steady. "All related to a mailbox that meets every single one of this HOA's design and safety guidelines. Meanwhile, I've spent time, money, and effort fixing property damage that someone on this board caused intentionally." People in the audience shifted. A couple of them murmured. One guy up front let out a quiet whistle. Karen opened her mouth like she was going to speak, but nothing came out. Her face had gone pale. A younger board member, one I hadn't really spoken to before, picked up the photo and examined it closely. Then he looked at Karen. Is this real? He asked. Because if it is, this changes things. She didn't answer. Another board member spoke up, this time a woman who'd been quiet through the whole meeting. If you vandalized his property, Karen, and then tried to penalize him for reinforcing it. Karen snapped. It's not like that. He's trying to make me look bad. He built that thing like a fortress just to provoke me. That was the moment. People started talking. Not shouting, just calmly, openly. Sharing little things. One woman said Karen once yelled at her kids for riding bikes too close to the sidewalk. A man near the back said he'd been fined 3 times for leaving his garbage bin out 20 minutes past pickup. It snowballed. Story after story. None of it loud. None of it dramatic. Just tired neighbors finally speaking up. Karen tried to cut in, tried to regain control, but it was too late. The room had already shifted. The spell was broken. People weren't scared of her anymore. I didn't say another word. I didn't need to. I gathered my folder, gave a small nod to the board, and walked back to my seat. Behind me, the meeting carried on, but it was different now. The tone had changed. People weren't whispering. They were engaging, asking questions, demanding fairness. And Karen, for once, didn't have anything to say. The next morning, the neighborhood group chat was buzzing. Not just the usual lost dog or yard sale posts. This time, it was screenshots of the meeting, photos of the flyer, and someone had even managed to sneak a blurry photo of Karen's face when I dropped that picture on the table. People were reacting fast, like a switch had been flipped. Some were shocked. Others weren't surprised at all. A few even joked about building mailbox bunkers of their own. I didn't say much in the group, just left a quick, thanks for the support last night. But the messages kept pouring in. You handled that like a champ. She's been pushing people around for years. Finally, someone stood up. It felt strange, honestly. I wasn't looking to be the face of an HOA rebellion. All I wanted was a mailbox that wouldn't get smashed every other week. But now it seemed like I had accidentally started something. That afternoon, I got a knock at the door. It was James again, the same neighbor who'd warned me about Karen's gossip campaign. He had a coffee in one hand and a sheepish grin on his face. Got a minute? He asked. I nodded and stepped out onto the porch with him. He handed me the coffee and sat down on the steps. So, the board's having an emergency follow-up meeting next week. No flyers this time. Just internal stuff. Word is, Karen's being reviewed. Reviewed? I raised an eyebrow. He smirked. That's H's speak for, we're figuring out how to get rid of her without a lawsuit. I couldn't help but chuckle. Took long enough. We talked for a bit, mostly about how many others in the community had similar experiences. Little run-ins. Random finds. Notes left on doors. Always vague. Always intimidating. And now, it was all coming out in the open. But later that night, something strange happened. I was sitting in my living room, lights dimmed, scrolling through messages when I noticed my motion light flicker on outside. Not unusual, sometimes a raccoon sets it off. But this time, the motion stayed. I peeked through the blinds. There, standing at the edge of my lawn, was Karen. No clipboard. No HOA badge. Just her, hands in her jacket pockets, staring at the mailbox. She wasn't doing anything. Not touching it. Just standing there. I didn't move. Didn't open the door. Just watched. After a minute or so, she turned around and walked off. Not fast. Not angry. Just so. Like someone who didn't quite know what to do anymore. I didn't mention it to anyone the next day. Maybe she was having a moment. Maybe she was realizing that the control she had over people, over me, was gone. And once that kind of power slips, it doesn't come back. The next few days were quiet. Peaceful even. No H letters, no gossip, no surprise visits. Just regular neighborhood life. Sprinklers running in the morning. Kids riding bikes again, without being yelled at. People starting to wave at each other a little more. Then came the email. Subject, HOA Board Announcement. Dear residents, we would like to inform you that Karen / last name, has stepped down from her position as HOA Board Enforcement Officer, effective immediately. We appreciate her years of service and will be holding nominations for a new compliance officer at the next meeting. Thank you for your continued cooperation. That was it. No drama. No explanation. Just gone. And almost immediately I started getting knocks at the door. Not from board members, but neighbors. People who hadn't said a word to me in the years I'd lived here. One guy brought over cookies. Another asked me if I could help him build a strong mailbox like mine. A couple even asked if I'd consider running for a spot on the board. I told them no, politely. I'd had enough of HOA politics to last me a lifetime. But something had changed. The neighborhood felt lighter. More open. Less like a rulebook and more like a place where people actually lived. And all of it, every bit of it, started with that one simple thing. A mailbox that wouldn't back down. Spring rolled in a little early that year. The air felt lighter, the lawns a bit greener. Or maybe it just seemed that way now that the tension had drained out of the neighborhood. People were out more, watering plants, walking dogs, talking across driveways. The whole place felt like it had taken a deep breath for the first time in a long while. Funny how something as simple as a mailbox could become the spark. I wasn't thinking about it much until I got another visitor, this time someone I'd never spoken to. She lived 3 streets over, probably in her 50s, and introduced herself as Sandra. I'd seen her around once or twice, but we'd never exchanged more than a nod. She stood on my porch holding a plastic folder and looked kind of nervous. "I hope I'm not bothering you," she said. I shook my head. "Not at all." She looked around like she was checking to make sure no one was watching. Then she leaned in and said, "I heard what you did at the meeting. I wanted to show you something." She opened the folder and pulled out 3 letters, each one with HOA letterhead. Fines. Warnings. Accusations about her backyard fence being non-compliant, her trash bins being visible too long, and even a violation notice for an American flag she'd mounted slightly off-center on her porch post. These started 2 weeks after I asked for an exemption for my husband's medical ramp, she said. He's in a wheelchair. I didn't even know what to say. She smiled, but it was a tired one. I think Karen had her sights on a lot of us. You just happened to be the first person who pushed back. I invited her in. We talked for almost an hour. She wasn't the only one either. Over the next week, 3 more neighbors came by, each with their own version of the same story. Letters, threats, silent pressure. Most of them hadn't wanted to rock the boat. Some didn't want to get involved. Others just didn't know what to do. I kept thinking about how close I came to just ignoring it. How easy it would have been to give up after the 2nd or 3rd smashed mailbox. But then I remembered standing there in the dark, watching Karen limp away from the indestructible post like it had humiliated her. That wasn't just about a mailbox. That was about someone who thought they were untouchable finally running into something they couldn't control. And now, people were organizing. Not in a dramatic way, no picket signs or marches, but in subtle, solid steps. Someone started a private resident group. Another neighbor volunteered to rewrite some of the HOA rules, with real clarity and fairness. A retired contractor down the road offered free advice to anyone wanting to upgrade their yard, fence, or mailbox without triggering violations. The best part? People weren't scared anymore. They were talking, connecting. And through all this, my mailbox stood tall. Unbothered. A bit scuffed from its early battles, sure, but stronger than ever. One evening, I was sitting on the porch with a glass of iced tea, just watching the sunset when a kid, maybe 10 or 11, rode by on a bike. He stopped, stared at the mailbox for a second, then turned to me. "Is that the one that broke someone's foot?" he asked with wide eyes. I grinned. "Something like that." He nodded like it made total sense, then pedaled off fast, like he had a story to tell. I laughed and leaned back in my chair. Didn't need to say much. Sometimes a well-built mailbox says everything that needs saying.